A few weeks ago, I dropped a hint that I was working on this video, and
a former emo, soft but savage, goal-oriented, gay and depressed.
okay, greetings, welcome to the video. My name's Carrie. Welcome to my channel. I can't believe I'm finally filming this. You guys have been on me for over a year to do this ever since I made the reading like Namjoon video. So here I am. Yoongi is getting his day in the sun. And apologies in advance, the world outside is a mess. We have construction right outside of my window. It is a freezing cold day in Seoul, so nobody wants to go outside. So there's like delivery people on motorcycles constantly. I hope you just, that's part of the ambiance, city living. What can I say? I'm going to talk about some books that Suga has been seen reading. As a disclaimer, I don't think that any of these are books, other than two, I don't think these are books that he has like outwardly said his opinion about. So maybe he read them and hated them. I don't know. But what's important here is that they are books that intrigued him enough to pick them up and read them. So just remember that. He hasn't flat out said that he loves some of these books. So I'm just going to be giving my thoughts on them, a little interpretation of them, and then I have, like I did in my previous video, I have some recommendations of my own, some books that I think either Suga would like himself, or people who are interested in the books that Suga likes. You might also like these books. I think they are kind of in the same family, if you will. So we're gonna dive right in. The goths, the gays, the depressed, this is all for you. So I hope that you enjoy it. Let's dive in. I don't know if this isn't like a content warning, but like, surprise, surprise, Suga likes kind of darker books. I think that I'll talk about this kind of more at the end, but like, the books we talked about with Namjoon were a little bit more like, why are we living? Isn't life a curious wonder? And Suga's more like, life sucks. How do we get through it? So this will actually heavily involve death, mental illness, stuff like that. So just as a warning, I think if you're here, you probably already kind of know what you're getting into. So yeah, that's enough of that. Let's talk about the books. Starting off with, hey, I have the physical book for this one. This is Almond, a book that was on both Namjoon and Suga's recommendation list. They were seen reading it, I believe, in the Soup show. What is this book about? This is about a boy who is living in Seoul, and he was born with this disability that basically his brain, there's like a part of your brain that's shaped like an almond that produces the chemicals needed to understand like fear. And so like, for example, if you put your hand on a hot pot and it burns you, your brain as a survival instinct should tell you, don't do that again. Remember that was scary? So like the next time you see a hot pot, your brain is like, don't go near that. That hurt last time. He doesn't have that. And so he goes through life in a really disconnected way. He has a really hard time interacting with people and just going through, daily life. And so he lives with his mother and his grandma, and they take care of him. They leave him like little post-its, like remember to ask people how they're doing, and like remember this and remember that, and basically they're just trying to give him the tools to live life, even with his disability, to live it to the fullest and stuff. There is a tragedy that takes away both his mother and his grandmother, and I believe he's still in high school, and he has to live on his own, and not only living on his own as a high school student, but living on his own as a high school student with this disability that really hinders how he can do pretty much anything. And so some more characters come into his life. some people that like actually he finds that he can help, even though like he has always been the receiver of help, and he's never really connected with people. He like learns how to connect and stuff like that. And yeah, I liked it. It was a very quick read. I thought that the writing was really interesting because it's told in this boy's point of view. It's in first person, and so I had like some issues with it only because our character is meant to be really kind of detached from emotions. And so when he's describing things that are really supposed to be like heartfelt and or like you should have a strong emotional reaction to it, he doesn't really. So our narrator, it's not that he's an unreliable narrator, it's just that he doesn't see the world like I would, and so the way that he explains things leaves me feeling kind of like not fully connected to it, which I guess is sort of the point. But a lot of people said that this was a book that made them just openly sob, and for me it wasn't like that. Again, only because our narrator wasn't like that. Like, he didn't make me feel super strongly about some of the things that were happening, even though they were like horrific. So yeah, I did quite enjoy it. I think that there is a discussion to be had about the actual disability that he is suffering from. It is a real life thing. So some people felt certain ways about it, and I can't speak on that. But yeah, Almond, a darker book, but definitely a really interesting read if you're interested in, like, I guess, how to navigate the world when you feel so alienated and when you feel like you can't connect with anything around you. Like, how do you still live through that? And I think that's a theme that we're going to keep seeing, is like, the world is really hard. Like, life is really hard. How do you deal with, like, feeling disconnected and feeling a huge loss in your life? How do you still navigate the world? And yeah, so I think that this was a good one to start off with. Get your hands on it. That is Almond. Next up, I have an issue. So I believe that this was actually on a list of books that Suga recommended, and it is About Her by Banana Yoshimoto, and I could not find it. I could find an article about it that was in like Portuguese, but I couldn't find the actual English translation. So instead, I'm going to talk about Kitchen, which is arguably one of her most famous works, and this is, it seems like, from what I translated from the Portuguese article, seems like of the same vein. I feel like Yoshimoto kind of writes about the same topics. So let's talk about Kitchen, which I know you can find easily in English. So Kitchen mainly revolves around the loss of a loved one by premature death, or death in general. And it's basically two short stories. One is much longer than the other, and so the main one is concerning our main girl, who has slowly lost everyone in her family. Her parents have died, and now her grandmother, who was kind of her last living relative, who she lived with, who she loved, passed away. And we meet her when she's kind of just like sitting in her house, like this empty house, being like, oh, okay, what now, sort of thing. Like, what do you do? And this guy that she knows vaguely comes to the door, and he's like, I heard about your grandma. I work in a flower shop, and she used to come to my store all the time. And my mom and I aren't sure you're doing okay. So, like, could you come live with us? How about you live with us? Because he knew that she was going to be selling the house, and then she wouldn't have anywhere to stay. So she's kind of like, that's weird, but also I do need a place to live, so sure. And so she moves in, and it's just about how she kind of begins to live again after losing this part of herself. Like, what's your next step after you lose all of your loved ones? And I do want to give kind of a content warning about this one, because the boy's mother has transitioned. She's a transgender woman, and This was written, I believe, in the 90s, and it is not very well done in terms of the vocabulary and the way that they treat this woman, because they often call her a transvestite. They'll use her incorrect pronouns, and she is kind of in on the joke sort of thing, like, you know, I used to be back when I was a man kind of thing, and they often, like, will sometimes call her, like, my mother, who's actually my father, who's actually my mother. Like, they make those kind of jokes, but it's out of love. It's never out of malice. But I do just want to preface that with, like, the handling of the trans character is definitely from the 90s in Japan. So just keep that in mind. But the mother is a huge character, and she is this, like, larger than life, effervescent, like, basically the glue that kind of ties the three of them together, because our main boy and girl are both very, like, taciturn. What would we even call them? Like, just kind of, like, floating around. I won't go too far into it, but there is just more and more loss, and, you know, how do you keep living? How can you be there for someone who has lost something, and how can you be there for yourself when you've lost something? I think it was the first story was really quite powerful, and then the second story goes a little bit more supernatural, I guess, and it's about a girl who lost her boyfriend in just this, like, total freak accident. And it talks about her experience and the brother, her friend, and the brother of her boyfriend, who obviously, like, he just lost his brother, and he lost his girlfriend as well in the same accident. And it just talks about how they're dealing with it, how they cannot get closure, and they're doing all these things to try and get closure. It just talks about that, like, that idea of closure, and how can you move on, and how can you, especially when it's like an accident, when something happens so suddenly. And so again, this idea, kind of the same as Almond, it's like, how do you take something that's so heavy and so life-altering and keep going? Especially when there's no closure. Because, like, even if you're able to say goodbye to your loved one, like, if it's a grandparent that you've had, like, they're very, very old, you, like, you're prepared, like, saying goodbye isn't, I always cry in these videos, damn it. Saying goodbye isn't enough. Like, you might get, like, quote unquote closure because you got to, like, be there or something, but there is nothing that can close a wound like losing a loved one. And so that is what this book is about, and, you know, how do you have that hole in your life but live after that, continue to live. Give me a sec. So the first two books I absolutely recommend, and the next book that we're going to talk about, I don't think that Suga actually recommended it, but he was seen reading it. Again, I think he was seen reading it on In the Soup. So I don't know his thoughts on this. I don't know if he would recommend it. Just saying that before I get into it. So please don't come after me. These are my thoughts. A lot of people love this book. A lot of people adore this book. I didn't, but we're still going to talk about it, and you can make up your mind, because books are different for everybody. It's like music. So here we go. We are talking about Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Editing Carrie here. So my sources may have been wrong, and it actually might have just been Namjoon who recommended the Midnight Library. I don't know if Suga has read this actually. Oops. But it was read in his presence. So, and I just want to talk about it. So there it is. Sorry. This is a very recent release. This book involves our main woman. If you haven't noticed by now, I do not remember character names. Welcome to my channel. So our main girl is in a rough patch in life, and I forget, full disclosure, I forget if she actually commits suicide, or if she is contemplating it, or if she attempts it and it is not successful. I forget exactly what happens, but she is at the end of her rope, and she does not want to continue living, is the gist of it. And she ends up finding herself in this kind of limbo area that is essentially a library. And this library is filled with this librarian who I think is actually my favorite character in the book. There aren't many characters, but I think I liked her the most. I don't remember. But this library is filled with books that are essentially all the different versions of your life, depending on like what decisions you have made. Like, did you decide to move to New York? What would your life be like? Did you decide to get coffee instead of tea that one day? What would your life be like? Like, you know, you get it. And so the book is basically us going through all of this woman's potential lives if she hadn't done X, Y, and Z, or if she had done X, Y, and Z. So it's really like, if you've ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life, it's very similar to that, where this one guy is basically like, if I was never born, the world would be better off. And then, of course, somebody comes and shows him the world as if he had never been born, and it's not better off, you know? It felt very much like that. And so the reason that I didn't super love it is because it did feel very, like, not self-helpy, but like it was very obvious in what it was doing, which is like, you can never have a perfect life, you will always have regrets, but like, if you just keep living it, it's worth it. Basically, like, don't succumb to your depression. And I do know that Matt Haig is apparently quite open about his mental health struggles, and so this was kind of like a self-help book for himself. I think that it was a very therapeutic thing for him to write when he was going through a very dark time, but at the same time, I felt like it kind of simplifies depression in a way that it's like, you know, don't be sad. Look at how your life is so nice, and like, no matter what decisions you make, life will always be kind of shit. So don't worry about it. Be happy, kind of thing. So, you know, I didn't super love that message where it's like, you know, depression is also just a chemical imbalance in your brain. And it doesn't matter if your life is perfect or if your life sucks, like, you're still going to be depressed. So that was my main issue with it, was it just felt kind of hokey. That being said, if you do want just like a book that tells you that it'll be okay, and you know, you would like to read that kind of message, it wasn't a bad book. It just really wasn't my style whatsoever. But yeah, that is The Midnight Library. And last but not least, a book that he has name dropped many times, and you should know very well, is The Alchemist. I cannot stress how big of a deal this book is in Korea. Like, it's a classic in the States. It's a classic, well-known book. But in Korea, it's one of those, like, I can't even think, you know how, like, I don't know if this is still the same, but in my generation, young boys to like 20-year-old boys, if you ask them what their favorite book is, they'd probably say On the Road or like Catcher in the Rye. It's like that. Like, if you ask the average dude what's your favorite book, they'll probably say The Alchemist. I don't know why. It is what it is. That's just a popular book in Korea. So this one is a little bit less sad. It's a little bit less about grief. It follows a boy who meets this kind of fortune teller, and she tells him that this like amazing treasure or whatever is waiting for you at the pyramids in Egypt. And so he kind of drops everything. He's a shepherd, and he kind of like drops everything and decides to cross the desert and go to Egypt and like find this thing that's waiting for him. And along the way, he hits a lot of bumps in the road. He falls in love a little bit, and he keeps thinking of like, no, you know what? I'll stop. I'm fine. Like, I'll just end it here, you know. And he meets characters that are sort of like, no, you've got to keep going. Like, you've got to, like, this is your dream. You've got to chase it. Because the reason he went to the fortune teller is because he was already having these dreams. And so really what the story is about is like, follow your dreams. This idea that like everyone does have a destiny and something great waiting for them, and like you just have to persevere and chase it and find it, and don't give up on them, and don't settle for something along the road when like you're still traveling towards your dream, which feels pretty Suga-esque, I would say. So yeah, that is The Alchemist. That is a classic book that you should definitely read just for the sake of it being great literature. There you are, The Alchemist. So those are Yoongi's recommendations or books that he has been seen reading. There were a couple more, but they were a lot more self-helpy, which isn't super my style, so I feel like I wouldn't be able to talk about them in a good way. But yeah, he read a couple that were about like dealing with grief and dealing with just sadness in life and how to get through it. So I will leave a couple of those down below as well. I don't enjoy self-help, so I'm going to pass on those. And before we jump into the books that I would recommend, I just want to do, not to compare and contrast them, but just like something I find really interesting is that with Namjoon's books, the questions were mainly focused on one hand, the absurdity of life, but on the other end, it was a lot of just like, why are we living? What makes a human a human? Thinking a lot about the soul, stuff like that. But on Suga's end of the spectrum, he's more concerned, he like knows that life is a thing and we all have to go through it, right? Like there's no way around it. You either exist or you don't, and it sucks. Like life, not to be dark, but like there are a lot of things in life that make you not want to be living. And I think it's definitely not suicidal. I would never ever say that, but there's to make it more clear, and I'm not diagnosing Yoongi in any way. I'm not saying anything about anything. Don't take it there. But I think that there is a song by the 1975 who I love called Always Wanna Die Sometimes, and Maddie Healy, who wrote it, was basically saying like, I'm not suicidal, but there are times when like you just want to shut off the world. Like wouldn't it just be really nice if you could just not just sleep, but just like shut it off for a little bit and like take a break, because things are heavy and like carrying it all the time is hard. And I think that that's what a lot of these books seem to be about. It's like you're hit with so much and how do you keep going? And so those were really the themes that I kind of felt through reading those books. So I think that the books that I'm now going to recommend are relatively similar and of that vein. And yeah, so let's dive into the last portion, which is books Yoongi should read. Hey, so the first book is actually a book that Namjoon recommended. I'm cheating. And I read it in my previous video where I read RM's books. And it is When Breath Becomes Air. This was a book that I totally did not think I would be interested in. I am not really one for memoirs, or I didn't used to be, but I think I am now. And this is a memoir, very short, written by a doctor who unfortunately gets cancer very, very young, and he actually passes away, I believe, right before the book is even finished. So he writes this aware that his life is going to be cut off very soon. And I've lost my voice, but partially my voice is going to be a little shaky talking about this one. Like I said, it's very short, but it's very powerful, talking about what life is worth living. And, you know, especially doctors, they put themselves in a position that normally when we think of doctors, we think of like people who make a lot of money. But going through med school, and then depending on what you go into in the medical field, like it can be so hard, you know, like if you lose a patient, you're so often the deliverer of bad news. And it's not just like, we can't fix your car today, ma'am. It's like, you have 3 months to live kind of news. And so he was talking a lot about that, like constantly dealing with death. Like his life is so intertwined with death even before he knew that he was sick. But that being said, it's also so intertwined with life. And he always kind of looked at it from a life perspective. It talks about really dark things, like he loses a friend to suicide because life is really fucking hard. But, you know, he also sees his daughter for the first, you know, like it's just, he really kind of walks that line that I think that these books that Yoongi talked about are concerned with, of like life and death cannot exist without each other. How do we live when that's true? And there's so much suffering, and I just felt like his views on death and loss and life were really, really interesting. And like I said, it's a really short book. I'm not a person who likes memoirs, and I still really enjoyed it. When Breath Becomes Air. Next up is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and this book has also a stage production, and it's another short one. It is about a boy with Asperger's, I believe. He is on the autistic spectrum. He lives in a world where a lot of things are hidden from him. I don't want to spoil it. How do I not do this? Basically, this story is sparked by an incident about a dog in the nighttime. He finds his neighbor's dog killed, and he becomes really fixated on this, and he's gonna find out what happened, and it just spirals from there. He decides to leave his home and you know, solve this mystery, solve the many, many mysteries, go out on his own. And I think that it ties in really well with these ideas of coping with loss, coping with feeling very disconnected, living in a world that you can't quite figure out, and you just don't feel like you perfectly fit. Things don't seem to really make sense to you. And yeah, I think that if you enjoyed especially something like Almond, perhaps, I think that this book is quite similar. And I can't say much more about it because this is a book that you can easily spoil. But I do recommend, if you enjoyed Almond, I would recommend The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Okay. A book that I never stopped talking about, one of my favorite books of all time. I also recommended it to Namjoon, and this is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. And I'm recommending it for a different reason, though. For Namjoon, I recommended it because it deals a lot with the soul and what is a human, what makes us us, right? But for Suga, I recommend it because it also deals heavily with loss, and I can't spoil it, but there is a lot of death, and there's a lot of like the inevitability of life coming to an end, especially prematurely, and how do you keep living when everyone around you is dying? How do you justify that? Like, doesn't that make you so angry, like that, you know, these people are being taken from you? Aren't you so upset? And how do you keep living? And how, like, especially in this case, our main character's line of work is heavily tied with death. There's just a lot of grief and loss, and not just the loss of life, but like the loss of possibility. I think, like, when you're young, you see life is just wide open to you, and like anything could happen, and as you get older, you realize that your paths and the possibility of what your life could be gets smaller and smaller. And so it's a lot about that, like grieving that loss too, of like I have to grieve the loss of a relationship. I have to grieve the loss of, you know, being an artist. I thought I was going to be this great artist, and now I just can't. I don't have time, and like that kind of grief as well. So I think that if any of those themes pique your interest, Never Let Me Go is an incredible book, and it has an equally incredible film starring like a crazy cast: Keira Knightley, Andrew Garfield. So please read the book and then watch the film. Never Let Me Go. And last but not least is The Vegetarian by Hangang. Because Namjoon recommended Human Acts, which is a stunning book, please read it. I feel like most people have read Human Acts, and I want to make it very clear that The Vegetarian is, at least when I read it, I thought it was very different from Human Acts. The way that it's written is a little bit more, the story is a little bit harder to follow. Let's just say that. But I loved it. I really loved it. I read it a couple years ago, and it's about this woman who, you know, is a wife. I believe she's also a mother. And she just one day stops eating meat. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but she's been having, I think it's like dreams. She's just like having a rough time and having these like really vicious kind of nightmares and visions. It's told in multiple points of view, but it's just about how she feels really disconnected from life, and so then everyone around her feels really disconnected, and like they can't understand her, and she knows that they can't understand her, and she just feels lost, and that makes her feel more lost, and like that makes the people around her feel more lost and alienated, and it's just this kind of slow descent. Again, like life is really hard. You can feel very disconnected and separate. How do you continue to live through that? The Vegetarian. And that is the end. Those are the books that Suga has enjoyed at some point, and books that I think that you would also enjoy. Yeah, I hope that this leads you down an interesting path. Once again, these books are across the board pretty heavy books emotionally, so just be prepared for that. And yeah, I hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you for poking and prodding me to get this book or this video done. Yeah, by the time I post this, it will almost be the end of the year. So I hope you guys are having a good December, but also just a fun little reminder that the end of the year sucks for a lot of people. I think that this kind of winding down, the changing of the seasons, the holiday stuff, it can also feel very lonely and just heavy as well. So if you are feeling any type of way, as far as, you know, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling alienated, you're feeling sad, whatever it is, you are absolutely not alone. I always talk about this. My birthday is December 31st, New Year's Eve, and I feel like everybody gets really sad on New Year's Eve, including myself. So I like cry on my birthday at least once. If you are feeling not great and you need to have yourself a little cry at any point in December, I guarantee you are not alone. Yeah, just sending love always, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, is that all? The construction is wild. But they're making progress, so that's great. They'll probably be done in like a day. The construction here in Korea is so fast. Anyway, I am going to go feed myself, edit this, and I will see you guys next time. So, bye.